Okay, so it's great to be here at Balnellan. James, would you like to introduce yourself and the system that you're
Well, I'm James. I'm part of the business, of the family business. Of there's 3 years at the moment in the business. We set up on our own here, I think it was 1983, and we started off with a small hab and a small area. Our area then was only probably been about 150 acres on the farm itself. We rented in areas of grass then, and we gradually expanded, bought another farm there in the 80s, 90s. We bought a bit more in the 2000s, and then we rent in quite a big area now. So we're now farming an area, something like, we grow about 400 odd of barley, and they would have a similar area of grass. That's what we have, a herd of, I think it's about 180 herd of cows at the moment. So we're pretty intensive at the moment, and staff is pretty low at the moment, as it is in every area. So that's kind of the position, and we get this stuff as byproducts from the distilleries, which is a great boost to the enterprise. We found it very beneficial for a start, but as we go through, we'll probably tell you some of the results we've found on the applications of it, which is some are alarming, some are quite interesting, some are beneficial, and some have got maybe the downside, but we can tell you that right through the rest of the conversation. So, but that's basically what we are at the moment. So.
Well, that's great, James. So following the end of the meetings, you are targeting your applications to soil status and offtakes. Is that now your routine, or what's your crop management and grass management policy at Balnellan?
Yep, we've always done a rigorous soil analysis here. We've always tried to keep a pH around about the 6s, and we found that early on, which came up in that meetings, that with some of the sludges was actually dropping the pH, which was a good thing. And then we went on to the Vitagrow and the other sludges, which was beneficial. So therefore, what we do is normally just work on the soil analysis, put it on as the legislation states, and now with this, it will be in this points that the storage tank, we got put that up, and that was a big advantage. We could target the time of year applications better. So that was a mix of two sometimes if we needed. And that was another advantage that we found.
So when did you start using the Vitagrow product?
Oh, I cannot remember the exact year, but it would be, I think it would be certainly three years, maybe coming 4 now, since we started on it, yes. Aye.
And do you have storage for it on farm just now, or does it all have to be tankered in?
It's tankered in, but we've got storage we can take up to 250,000 gallons at the moment, which is, we can store enough to do, I think that covers about the application rate's about 10 tonne to the acre. So if you work it out, that's about 200 odd acre, you see.
And either your reason for putting that up was to avoid spreading over winter and going onto the ground when conditions weren't right. Was that your main reason?
That was the main reason, and put it on at the proper season when the most advantage of the stuff. And because the supply was pretty limited when you needed it. In the growing season, that was another reason.
And with the soil nutrient network, you had this analysed as well as their analysis. What were you tending to show? Was it a high nitrogen product? Was it a high phosphate product? What were the general features you were finding that was good and maybe bad about it?
The Vitagrow. Mm-hmm. The Vitagrow, it was the highest that was noticed on was phosphate, which is quite expensive for us to apply. So it was a big advantage here because we are fairly low in phosphate anyway. But the only downside of the phosphate, if you apply too much of phosphate, you tend to get a lock-up in the soil of your other trace elements. So you have to be very careful applying that stuff. And will be something in the future that we were a bit worried about.
So with the agro products, are you applying that on your combinable grounds and or grassland? Where are you are you normally targeting it on the farm?
At the moment, we've been a bit worried on crops. We did trial a little bit on crops, and we just found it tend to lodge in strips. Because the splash plate was tended to be heavier in certain bits. And what we found was the crop just went flat. Again, it was soil analysis on it, analysed the crop, but it didn't show anything different on it for some reason, or the straw, but it did lodge. So we tend to just have concentrated mainly in grassland.
And then in terms of other organic manures, what have you got on farm? Slurry, farmyard manure, what do you have that's all you can also apply to increase the P&K content and put back on the soils?
What we did, we used to buy the artificial, and that's what we usually use it to counteract artificial fertilizer. We found it, according to the analysis and according to the results done by the companies supplied us, we should have been able to grow a good crop of grass for silage with the digested only at 10 ton to the acre. But we found that the first year we did that, no. We were well down in the silage crop. So this last couple of years, we've also applied either some compound to balance it, and we found that gave us a better result. But we still found that the silage crop was very soft, and we were a wee bit worried about that. And what is going to be, that was after maybe 2 years solid application of the Vitagrow. So that's how it'll come up later on this. We've stopped it for a moment.
You had some soil profiles done on a few fields and some soil pits and compaction looked at. What were you finding?
The compaction was one of the biggest problems that was highlighted, and a reduction in the grazing, which was another big thing that we weren't aware of. But when Gavin pointed it out and showed us exactly on the fields, it was very considerable. So that was definitely a big change. And the biggest change to stop that was the storage tank.
Looking into this kind of the soil biology and worms, was there anything done on that?
Yep, we did the worms, and it was very interesting. We did 3-4 good trial plots in the worms. We found that some of the worms actually had increased, which was a good result. The other trials on the worms didn't seem to give us a real indication of anything different.
If you were doing a reseed, would you be using digestate to encourage your seedlings on say you're converting a bit of permanent pasture and it's past it and you need to start from scratch? What would be your policy? Obviously depending on soil type and location, but
that's something we haven't to trial. No, we're a bit wary of the stuff to trial on, especially on young grasses being reseeded at the moment. We tend to let them get a start on their own with a very little application of a normal fertilizer, a normal one, so that we can control the amount it's getting accurately, because with the Vitagrow, it's so variable, and our application systems at the moment are very inaccurate. So again, we wouldn't go down that route until it's fairly well established. Because if you apply too much to an early young grass, it probably died during the winter or something. So we certainly wouldn't trial that.
So following the years of using these digestive products and the soil nutrient network, what was the main thing that what's the big change with these products that you've?
Initially, for a start, when we got the product for a start, they were paying us to apply it. Therefore, that was a big saving on our fertilizer bill. But the things has changed so much now, and they're actually charging us quite a fee for the stuff. And if you take it into calculation, you're tanker, your time it takes to apply it, and the stuff, you have to look very carefully because it becomes quite expensive. It's not cheap fertilizer anymore. We have done quite a lot of calculations on it and found it was almost as expensive as an artificial fertilizer at the moment.
So your decision now is that you suspended all use of it for the next few years, just until. Is that's been the? See, we know here. Has that been the final decision?
That is the decision at the moment, yes, because we are waiting to see the initial effect it's having on the soil. So we have suspended for 3 years at the moment. We had a meeting with the Weser Gauldwell, the actual plant managers, and we said 3 years to see where we stand, and we will come back again and might extend it again to maybe 5 years. We don't know. But we'll have a look at it again and see. But other deciding factor will be, of course, fertilizer has shot up quite a bit, which will maybe make another decision again. So we'll see where it goes from there.
So the Soil Nutrient Network meetings and what you've been doing has highlighted the importance of monitoring and measuring. So what's your policy on how often you should soil test and how often you should get your analyses of these different organic wastes?
We've always done a soil test very rigorously every 3 years. So I don't see any point in increasing the soil analysis any more than the 3 years, but the Vitagrow test would be very important to get it tested every time you fill up. Well, we can test the tank, which would be a bulk, which that would be ideal. Test at one load at a time would be very, very variable. So if you've got a tank, that's the route to go. And preferably if you put in tanks with an agitation system as well, because the stuff tends to settle as well. So we have our tank, we've put in a system that we can agitate. We would definitely go back to using the stuff, I think, once we finish our period. And it would also depend on the results that we've seen without the stuff for 3 years. And we would still keep the tank system at the moment because we are in control of the application times and the application amounts. And certainly going doing the trail and shoe route or the dribble bar, which is a must, and get away from the tankers. And I think that would be the route. And provided that they supply the stuff at a reasonable cost, we would look at that as well. But if they start charging quite a high rate for the stuff, I think you have to look very carefully at what you're spending it on. It could just be water.
Mm-hmm. But that just leaves me to say, James, thank you very much for doing this interview and for hosting these 3 meetings and for all the tests you're doing. And it's great to have your input and feedback on this. Thank you very much.
Yeah, it's been quite interesting too. I've been quite happy to go again. It's you always get a point or two of interest. Somebody's got something different to say. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
Yep, no, that's great.